A German shepherd appeared on the dusty side of an abandoned road. Her fur, once black and red, was covered in dirt, and her body was emaciated. She moved on 3 legs. The front left one was missing, but that didn't stop her. In the eyes, full of pain and determination, hope smoldered. She carried one of her 3 puppies carefully between her teeth, while the other 2, tiny and trembling, trotted along, clinging to their mother. The shepherd knew that their lives were in her paws. Under the dim light of the street lamp, she noticed a woman near an old truck. Gathering all her strength, she decided to approach. The shepherd dog limped towards the woman and with infinite care placed one puppy at her feet. She nudged the other 2 with her nose and sat them down next to each other. Her tear-filled gaze met the woman's eyes. Letting out a heart-rending whine, she prayed for salvation. The 3-legged body trembled, but she did not retreat. The woman froze, shocked. In front of her stood an exhausted dog who had given up her babies. The puppies squealed weakly, their bodies shaking from the cold. The shepherd looked and his eyes screamed, "Save them." The woman felt her heart squeeze. The shepherd, standing on 3 legs, took a step back, then another. Her movements were slow, almost hesitant, as if every inch away from the puppies was tearing her heart apart. Her gaze, full of silent pain, lingered on the 3 tiny bodies lying at the feet of the unfamiliar woman. The puppies squealed weakly. Their fur barely covered their bodies, shivering from the cold, and their tiny paws convulsively clung to the cold ground. The shepherd knew this was her last chance, her only opportunity to give them a future. She herself might no longer have. Her eyes, wet with tears, once again looked over each baby as if she wanted to forever imprint their image in her heart. She turned around, her 3-legged body tensed, preparing to retreat into the darkness from which she had come. This gesture was not just a farewell. It was a sacrifice, the hardest one a mother could make, giving everything for her children. The woman, standing by the truck, felt her throat tighten as tears welled up. She couldn't take her eyes off this scene. The emaciated German shepherd, missing one paw and its fur covered in dirt and dust, had abandoned her puppies and was now walking away as if accepting the inevitable. The woman saw how the dog's shoulders were shaking, how its tail, usually proud and strong, was now lowered, almost touching the ground. She noticed wounds on the shepherd's paws, traces of long wanderings, and protruding ribs that betrayed weeks of starvation. This dog went through hell to bring her babies here, and now, having given them away, she prepared to disappear into the night as if her own life no longer mattered. The woman felt a wave of determination rise up inside her, mixed with pity and admiration for this incredible devotion. "Stop," she exclaimed. Her voice was louder than she expected, echoing in the empty silence of the night. The shepherd froze, her body tense like a string ready to snap. She didn't turn around, but her ears twitched slightly, picking up a sound that could mean anything: hope or yet another disappointment. The woman took a step forward, then another. Her boots crunched on the gravel, and her heart beat so hard she could feel it pounding in her temples. She didn't know what had made her scream, but letting that dog go, leaving her alone after such a sacrifice, was beyond her strength. "Please don't go," she added more quietly. Her voice trembled with emotions that she herself did not fully understand. The shepherd stood motionless. Her breathing was heavy, ragged, as if she was torn between the instinct to leave and the weak spark of hope that the woman's voice had ignited in her soul. The woman knelt down next to the puppies, Her hands shook as she carefully touched one of them. The baby squeaked weakly. His tiny body was so cold that she could hardly hold back her tears. She looked up at the shepherd, still standing a few feet away, and realized that this dog had not simply given up its babies. It had entrusted them to her, a stranger, in an act of desperate faith. The woman took off her warm jacket. Her fingers were frozen in the cold night air, but she didn't notice. Carefully, as if afraid to frighten the moment, she wrapped all 3 puppies in soft cloth, pressing them to herself. They shifted, pressing themselves against each other, seeking the warmth they so lacked. "You are not alone," the woman said quietly. Her voice was soft but firm, like a promise. She stood up, holding the bundle of puppies, and stepped towards the shepherd. She slowly raised her head. Her eyes, still wet, met the woman's. At that moment something changed. The air between them became heavier, filled with unspoken emotions. The shepherd did not back away, did not growl, did not run away, as any other stray dog accustomed to the cruelty of the world would have done. Instead, she stood as if checking to see if this was a deception, an illusion, born of her tired mind. The woman extended her hand, her fingers hovering a few centimeters from the shepherd's muzzle, waiting for a reaction. The dog did not flinch. Her nose, cold and wet, gently touched the woman's palm, and this light contact was like a bridge, connecting them at that moment. The shepherd stepped closer. Her 3-legged body moved with amazing grace, despite her fatigue, and she stopped next to the puppies. Her gaze darted to the bundle, then back to the woman. There was no longer the despair in her eyes that there had been before, but there was no trust yet either. Only a cautious hope, weak as a candle flame in the wind. The woman felt her own eyes growing moist. She looked at the puppies, then at their mother, and realized that this dog wasn't just looking for help. She was looking for someone who wouldn't betray her faith. "I will not leave you," the woman whispered, and although she knew the shepherd wouldn't understand the words, she hoped her tone would convey the promise. The shepherd blinked. Her ears moved slightly as if picking up the warmth in the woman's voice. She didn't move, but her posture became slightly less tense, as if she allowed herself to believe for a moment that her babies were safe. The woman hugged the bundle of puppies tighter to her chest, feeling their faint warmth seeping through the fabric of her jacket. She knew that this was only the beginning, that trials lay ahead. But at that moment, under the dim light of a street lamp on a deserted road, she felt connected to this dog and her children by an invisible thread. Something inside her whispered that she had no right to let them down. The shepherd, still standing nearby, lowered her head and gently touched her nose to the edge of the crib where her puppies lay. It was her way of making sure they were still there, that they were alive. The woman froze, afraid to frighten away this fragile moment of trust. She slowly crouched down to be level with the shepherd and whispered, "We can do this together." The shepherd looked at her, and something new flashed in her eyes. Not complete trust, but a spark that could eventually flare into a flame. That look was a promise, a silent agreement between them that they would not abandon each other in this cruel world. The woman opened the door of the old truck. Her movements were slow and careful, as if she was afraid to upset the fragile balance that had been established between her and the 3-legged German. "Shepherd, let's go home," she said. Her voice was soft, but with an unwavering confidence, as if these words were not just an invitation, but a promise she intended to keep. She held tightly to the bundle of puppies, wrapped in her warm jacket, feeling their tiny bodies, move feebly, searching for warmth. The shepherd dog standing nearby raised its head. Her eyes followed the woman's every movement carefully, but there was no longer the same alertness in them as before, only fatigue mixed with timid hope. Despite her limp, she jumped into the passenger seat with surprising dexterity. Her three-legged body moved with amazing grace, as if her physical disability could not break her spirit. She settled down next to the bundle. Her nose gently touched the fabric, checking to see if her babies were okay. The woman sat behind the wheel, glanced at the dog, and felt her heart squeeze with a mixture of admiration and responsibility. As the engine quietly rumbled and the truck moved off down the deserted road, she realized that her life had already changed irreversibly. The journey home was short, but every minute seemed like an eternity. The woman glanced from time to time at the shepherd dog, who sat motionless. Her gaze was fixed on the puppies. The light from the rare lantern slid over her dirty fur, highlighting the scars and dents on her emaciated body. The woman noticed how her paws were shaking, not so much from the cold, but from exhaustion. And yet the dog did not allow herself to relax, as if her only task was to protect the babies. "You're so strong," the woman muttered, not expecting an answer, but her words hung in the air, filling the truck's cabin with warmth. The shepherd slightly moved his ears, as if he had caught the intonation, but his eyes did not leave the bundle. The woman gripped the steering wheel. Her fingers turned white with tension. She didn't know what was waiting for them ahead, but she was sure of one thing. She would not let down this dog who had entrusted her with the most precious thing. When the truck stopped at a small house on the outskirts of the village, night had already fully come into its own. The house was modest, with wooden walls and a slanted porch, but inside it promised warmth and safety. The woman turned off the engine and looked at the shepherd. "We're home," she said. Her voice trembled with emotion. She carefully picked up the bundle of puppies and got out of the car, leaving the door open. The shepherd did not immediately follow her. She froze in her seat. Her gaze darted between the woman and her babies, as if she was still unsure whether to trust this new place. But then, gathering her strength, she jumped to the ground. Her three-legged body wobbled slightly, but she immediately regained her balance. The woman noticed how the dog was carefully examining the surroundings. Her ears caught every rustle, and her nose inhaled unfamiliar smells. It wasn't just caution. It was the instinct of a mother who couldn't afford to make a mistake. It was warm inside the house. The soft light from the old lamp filled the room with a cozy glow. The wooden floors creaked underfoot, and in the corner a fireplace crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The woman walked over to the old sofa by the window and began to build a nest for the puppies. She folded several thick blankets, added a soft pillow, trying to make the place as comfortable as possible. Carefully unfolding the jacket, she laid the 3 puppies on the makeshift bed. They squeaked faintly. Their tiny paws twitched, searching for each other. The woman froze, watching them. Her heart sank at their fragility. They were so small, so defenseless, that she felt almost physical pain at the thought of how much they had to endure. The shepherd dog followed him into the house. Her steps were slow, almost silent. Despite the limp, she stopped at the threshold. Her eyes took in the space, the low ceiling, the worn carpet, the smell of old wood and smoke from the fireplace. The woman turned around and met her gaze. "It's okay," she said quietly, pointing to the sofa. The shepherd took a step forward, then another. Her movements were full of caution, as if she was afraid that this warm house would turn out to be just a mirage. When she reached the sofa, she froze. Her nose quivered, catching the scent of the puppies. Then, with the greatest tenderness, she climbed onto the blanket and lay down next to the babies, covering them with her body. Her three-lobed figure curled into a protective circle. Her muzzle gently touched each puppy, as if reassuring them that they were now safe. The woman watched this scene, feeling her eyes fill with tears. She had never seen such devotion, such fortitude. The shepherd, despite everything she had experienced, hunger, pain, the loss of one paw, continued to fight for her children. The woman walked to the kitchen, her steps almost silent, so as not to disturb the mother and her children. She opened the refrigerator, took out some meat left over from dinner, and heated it up, mixing it with warm water to make it softer. After filling the bowl, she added another, one with clean water, and returned to the sofa. The shepherd raised her head, her ears pricked up, but she did not growl or back away. The woman slowly placed the bowls on the floor, a few steps away from the dog. "This is yours," she said. Her voice was soft, soothing. She stepped back, giving the shepherd space. The shepherd did not rush to the food as a hungry dog, accustomed to fighting for every piece would do. Instead, she looked at the bowl, then at the woman. Her eyes were full of doubt. How many times has food been placed in front of her, only to be taken away? How many times were her hopes dashed? The woman realized her hesitation and squatted down to be on the same level as the dog. "Eat, please," she repeated. Her tone was full of warmth. Finally, the shepherd slowly stood up. Her three-legged body moved with difficulty, but with dignity. She walked up to the bowl. Her nose carefully touched the food, and only after she was sure that it was not a deception did she begin to eat. She ate slowly, almost ceremoniously, as if she was afraid to believe that this food belonged to her. Each bite seemed to give her a little bit of strength back, but her gaze kept returning to the puppies, checking to see if they were okay. When she finished, she returned to the sofa without making a sound. She lay down next to the puppies, her body curled around them again like a shield. The woman looked at her, feeling something new growing inside her. Not just pity, but a deep connection that defied explanation. She came closer and slowly extended her hand, waiting for a reaction. The shepherd did not flinch. Her eyes followed the movement, but there was no fear in them, only weariness and a weak spark of trust. The woman gently touched her head. Her fingers slid through the dirty fur, feeling the warmth and the pulse of life beneath. "You did the best you could," she whispered. "Now I'm here." The shepherd blinked. Her breathing became a little deeper, as if these words penetrated her soul. She didn't sleep. Her eyes still followed the woman, but there was something new in them. Not complete trust, but a hint of it, like the first ray of sunshine after a long night. The woman stood up. Her own body ached with fatigue, but she felt a strange peace. She looked at the puppies, at their mother, and realized that this house was no longer just hers. He became a refuge for this small family, and she will do anything to protect them. The fire in the fireplace continued to crackle, filling the room with warmth, and in this comfort the woman felt the beginning of something greater, not just salvation, but a new life that they would build together. The morning light filtered through the threadbare curtains of the small house, filling the room with a soft, golden glow. The woman was awakened by a barely perceptible sound, a faint squeak, which came from the sofa where a three-legged German shepherd was sleeping with her 3 puppies. She slowly raised her head. Her eyes were still clouded with sleep, but her heart immediately sank from the memories of the previous night. The shepherd lay, curled up around her babies. Her body formed a protective circle as if she was their only barrier against a cruel world. For the first time in a long time, the dog slept. Her breathing was deep and even, and her muscles, usually tense from constant readiness to flee, finally relaxed. Her three-legged figure, covered in dirty, matted fur, seemed vulnerable in this peace, but at the same time radiated the unrivaled power of motherly love. The woman froze, afraid to disturb this fragile harmony, and her gaze dropped to the puppies. They were alive, they're tiny, chests rising and falling, but their breathing was uneven and their feeble movements betrayed how fragile they still were. The woman felt her heart clench with anxiety. These babies were still balancing on the edge of life and death. She rose quietly from the chair where she had spent the rest of the night. Her body ached from the awkward position, but she didn't pay attention to it. Approaching the sofa, she carefully sat down next to it. Her eyes studied the puppies carefully. Their fur was thin, barely covering their pink skin, and their tiny paws trembled, even in their sleep. One of them, the smallest, let out a weak squeak, and the shepherd immediately opened his eyes. Her gaze, full of instinctive alarm, darted to the children, then to the woman. There was no fear in him, as before, but there was still wariness, left over from long days of loneliness and betrayal. The woman slowly raised her hands, showing that she posed no threat. "It's okay," she whispered. Her voice was soft, soothing like a lullaby. The shepherd blinked, her ears flicking slightly, and she lowered her head back to the puppies gently, sniffing each one to make sure they were okay. This gesture of complete tenderness made the woman swallow the lump in her throat. She knew that this mother had done everything she could to get her children to safety, but now they needed help that she alone could not provide. The woman stood up, her movement slow so as not to alarm the shepherd. She walked to a window, looked out onto the deserted street of the village, and took a deep breath. The morning was cold. The air smelled of dampness and fallen leaves, but there was something alive in the smell, promising a new day. She knew the puppies needed a doctor. Their weakness, trembling and uneven breathing, indicated that time was working against them. Returning to the sofa, she squatted down and looked at the shepherd. "I have to get them," she said quietly. Her voice trembled with a mixture of determination and fear. She was afraid not only for the puppies, but also for how their mother would react to their separation, even temporary. The shepherd raised his head. Her eyes, deep and expressive, seemed to penetrate the woman's soul. There was concern in them, but not resistance, as if the dog understood that her babies needed something more than her warmth. The woman carefully wrapped the puppies in the same blanket they had slept in, trying not to disturb them. They moved weakly. One of them let out a thin squeak, and the shepherd immediately moved forward. Her nose touched the bundle. "I'll return them, I promise," the woman said. Her words were full of firmness, although inside she herself was not sure whether she would be able to fulfill this promise. The shepherd looked at her. Her gaze was heavy, almost tangible, as if she was weighing every word. The woman felt her heart pounding, but she couldn't let fear stop her. She stood up, holding the bundle of puppies, and headed for the door. The shepherd dog jumped up after him. Her three-legged body moved with amazing speed despite her fatigue. She kept up the pace, her eyes never leaving the bundle, and every step was full of determination not to lose sight of her children. The woman opened the door of the truck and placed the puppies on the passenger seat, wrapping them in another layer of cloth to protect them from the morning chill. The shepherd dog jumped after him. Her movements were precise despite her physical disability, and she settled down next to the puppies. Her muzzle was almost touching the blanket, and her breathing was heavy, as if she was holding back a whine that was trying to escape. The woman got behind the wheel. Her hands shook as she turned the key in the ignition. "We will do whatever it takes," she said. "Talk more to yourself than to the dog." But her voice trembled with emotion. The road to the veterinary clinic was short, but every minute seemed endless. The morning fog enveloped the village, muffling the sounds, and only the rumble of the engine broke the silence. The woman kept glancing at the shepherd dog, which sat motionless. Her eyes were fixed on the puppies. One of them made a faint sound, and the dog immediately leaned down. Her nose gently touched the blanket, as if she wanted to calm the baby with her presence alone. The woman pressed her lips together, her thoughts confused. She didn't know how long it had been since the puppies had last eaten. I didn't know how long they could last in this state, but she knew one thing: she would not let them die. "Hold on," she muttered. Her voice was barely audible, but the shepherd slightly moved his ears as if he sensed her determination. As they approached the clinic, the sun was just beginning to rise above the horizon, painting the sky a pale pink. The woman got out of the truck, holding a bundle of puppies, and headed towards the entrance. The shepherd followed her. Her steps were quick, almost desperate, despite her limp. The inside of the clinic smelled of antiseptic and something else, a mixture of fear and hope that seemed to permeate the walls. The girl behind the counter looked up. Her face immediately became serious when she saw the bundle in the woman's hands. "What happened to them?" she asked. Her voice was professionally calm, but with a hint of alarm. "I don't know exactly," the woman answered. Her words were hurried, almost confused. "I found them last night. They are very weak and hardly move. Please, help." The door to the examination room opened, and a veterinarian came out, a middle-aged man with tired eyes but firm gaze. "Let me see," he said, holding out his hands. The woman carefully handed him the bundle. Her fingers trembled as she released the puppies. The shepherd immediately leaned forward. Her body tensed, and she let out a low, trembling whine, not a threat, but a plea. The vet looked at her, his face softening. "I'll do everything I can," he said. But when he turned to enter the examination room, the shepherd dog rushed after him. "No, wait," the veterinarian began, but the woman quickly sat down next to the dog, placing her hand on its head. "I'll give them back," she whispered. Her voice was full of firmness, although inside she was afraid that she would not be able to keep this promise. The shepherd looked at her. Her eyes were full of pain and disbelief, but she did not rush after the doctor. She froze. Her body was shaking, and her gaze was fixed on the closed door. The reception room was silent, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. The woman sat down on a chair, her hands clenched and unclenched nervously. The shepherd dog sat at her feet. Her three-legged body was motionless as a statue, but her ears caught every sound from behind the door. She didn't blink or move. Her gaze was fixed on the observation deck, as if she could bring her puppies back by force of will. The woman looked at her feeling her own heart breaking at the sight. She knew this dog had been through more than anyone could imagine, and now her last hope depended on the hands of others. I'll be fine, the woman muttered. Her voice was barely audible, but she repeated these words over and over again, like a mantra to convince herself. The hour dragged on endlessly. The woman kept looking at her watch, her fingers fiddled with the edge of her sleeve. The shepherd did not move. Her pose was the epitome of pure, unadulterated despair. The woman leaned over and gently touched her back, feeling how tense her muscles were. "We can handle it," she said. Her voice trembled, but there was genuine faith in it. The shepherd didn't react, but her ears perked up slightly as if she sensed the warmth in those words. The woman closed her eyes. Her thoughts revolved around the puppies, their fragile bodies and weak breathing. She imagined them fighting, their tiny hearts beating. Despite all the difficulties, she prayed that the doctor could perform a miracle. Finally, the door to the examination room opened and the veterinarian came out holding a bundle in the same blanket. His face was serious, but not hopeless, and this gave the woman a faint spark of hope. The shepherd jumped up, its three-legged body tensed, its ears rose, and its eyes, previously dull, flashed, rushing toward the small bundle in the doctor's hands. The woman held her breath, her hands clenched into fists. The veterinarian sat down slowly and handed the shepherd a blanket. "They are still weak, but they have a chance," he said. His voice was calm but warm. "They need warmth, milk, and lots of attention. If they survive the next couple of days, they have a good chance." The shepherd didn't wait for him to finish. She ran up, forgetting about fatigue and pain, and began feverishly sniffing the puppies, licking their tiny faces, making sure they were alive. Then she made a sound that tore through the souls of everyone in the room, a long, trembling groan, full of relief, mixed with unspoken gratitude. The woman felt tears running down her cheeks, and she made no attempt to hide them. The shepherd fell on her front paws, covering the puppies with her muzzle, as if protecting them from the whole world. It was a moment when her fear, her pain, her despair retreated, giving way to the hope that she had not allowed herself to feel for so long. The veterinarian looked at the woman and smiled slightly. "This is a fighter," he said, pointing to the shepherd. "And you too? I think together you can handle it." The woman nodded, her throat tight with emotion, but she managed to squeeze out, "We'll do whatever it takes." She looked at the shepherd, at its three-legged body, still shaking from what it had experienced, and realized that this dog had taught her something important about strength, about sacrifice, about the hope that lives even in the darkest times. When they left the clinic, the sun was already rising higher. Its rays penetrated the morning fog, promising a new day, full of possibilities. The sun was already high in the sky when the woman, her three-legged German shepherd, and three tiny puppies left the veterinary clinic. Its warm rays dispersed the morning fog and filled the village with soft light. The woman opened the truck door. Her movements were measured, almost ritualistic, as if she knew that this moment was not just a return home, but the beginning of something much greater. She carefully placed a bundle of puppies on the passenger seat, making sure the blanket was tightly wrapped around their fragile bodies, protecting them from the slight breeze. The shepherd, without wasting a second, jumped after him. Her three-legged body moved with surprising confidence, despite the fatigue that was still visible in her tense muscles. She settled down next to the puppies, her muzzle almost touched the blanket, and her eyes, no longer so, dim, carefully followed their every movement. The woman sat behind the wheel, her hands resting softly on the steering wheel, and she glanced at her unusual companion. At that moment she felt a strange warmth in her chest. Not just relief that the puppies were alive, but a deep, almost tangible sense of connection with this dog who had trusted her with her family. As the engine quietly rumbled and the truck moved along the familiar road, the woman realized that this day would forever remain in her heart as a turning point in her life. The road home was quiet. The morning village slowly woke up. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked. A gate creaked, and the smell of freshly baked bread from the local bakery penetrated through the open window. The woman was silent, letting the silence fill the cabin, but her thoughts were swirling around the shepherd and her babies. She remembered the first time she saw this dog on the side of the road, exhausted, limping, with eyes full of pain, but still carrying her puppies with such tenderness, as if they were her only treasure. She thought about how much strength it had taken for this mother to go through hunger, fear, and loneliness to trust her children to a stranger. The woman looked at the shepherd dog, who was sitting motionless. Her nose gently touched the blanket as if she wanted to make sure her babies were still breathing. One of the puppies let out a weak squeak, and the shepherd immediately leaned down, licking its tiny muzzle with endless care. This gesture of complete love made the woman smile despite the fatigue that lay like a heavy burden on her shoulders. "You're incredible," she whispered, not expecting an answer, but her voice was full of genuine admiration. When the truck pulled up to the house, the woman turned off the engine and sat for a moment, watching the shepherd. She raised her head. Her eyes met the woman's, and at that moment an invisible spark passed between them, a silent understanding that did not require words. The woman opened the door and walked out holding a bundle of puppies. The shepherd jumped after him. Her three-legged body wobbled slightly on the gravel, but she immediately regained her balance. Her gaze never left the children. The woman headed towards a house. Her steps were light despite the sleepless night, and her heart beat in the rhythm of new hope. She opened the door, and the warm air, scented with wood and coal from the fireplace, enveloped her like an embrace. The shepherd dog followed. Her movements were careful, but not as wary as yesterday. She knew this place, and although it was still foreign, it felt like the safety she had been searching for so long. The woman returned to the sofa where she had made a nest for the puppies the night before. She carefully unfolded the blanket and laid the babies on the soft blankets. Their tiny bodies moved weakly, searching for each other. The shepherd dog immediately climbed up next to him. Her three-legged body curled around them like a shield, and her muzzle gently touched each puppy, checking to see if they were okay. The woman watched this scene, her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of relief and joy. She sat down next to him. Her hands froze in the air, not daring to disturb her mother and her children. "Are you home?" she said quietly. Her voice trembled with emotion she couldn't contain. The shepherd looked at her. Her eyes were deep, almost human, and there was a flash of something new in them. Not complete trust, but its emergence like the first sprout after a long winter. The days slowly flowed into each other, and the house, once quiet and deserted, filled with life. The woman set up a corner for the puppies, adding more blankets and an old hot water bottle to keep them warm. She prepared a special formula for them, following the vet's instructions, and fed them with an eyedropper until they were strong, enough to drink. On their own, the shepherd dog tirelessly took care of her babies. Her three-legged figure was always nearby, warming them, licking them, protecting them. But with each passing day she became a little less wary. Her gaze increasingly lingered on the woman, and gratitude appeared in it. The woman noticed these changes, and her heart was filled with warmth. She began to talk to the shepherd, telling him about simple things, about the weather, about the smell of the flowers outside the window, about how one day they would all go for a walk in the field together. The shepherd listened, her ears moving, as if she understood not the words, but the feelings that stood behind. One evening, as the fire in the fireplace lit the room with a warm orange light, something unexpected happened. The woman sat on the sofa, her hands resting tiredly on her knees and her thoughts wandering somewhere far away. The shepherd dog, who had been lying with the puppies, suddenly stood up and slowly approached her. She stopped. Her eyes searched the woman's face carefully, as if searching for an answer to a question she couldn't ask. Then, with the utmost care, she laid her head on the woman's lap. Her fur was still, rough from dirt, but warm, alive. The woman froze, afraid to frighten. This moment, she slowly reached out and gently stroked the shepherd behind the ears, feeling him relax slightly under her touch. "Are you home?" the woman whispered. Her voice was full of tenderness. The shepherd closed her eyes, and at that moment the fear, loneliness, and pain that had haunted her for so long seemed to recede, giving way to peace. A week passed, and the puppies began to change. Their eyes opened, small, bright, full of curiosity. Their paws, still clumsy, began to move with more confidence, and their faint squeaks gave way to louder sounds as they searched for their mother or each other. One morning, a woman was preparing breakfast when she heard a rustling sound. She turned around and froze. One of the puppies, the bravest, stood on trembling paws. His body was weak, but he stubbornly tried to take a step. He fell, but immediately tried again, and then with a quiet squeak, he reached his mother, hiding under a paw. The shepherd looked at him with pride. Her muzzle touched him softly, and then she looked up at the woman. For the first time, her tail twitched, a barely noticeable movement, but for the woman it was like the discovery of a new world. She sat down next to him, her hand gently touching the puppy, and then the shepherd. "You did it," she said. Her voice trembled with joy. The shepherd blinked, and there was no longer any fear in her eyes, only gratitude and something resembling love. As the days went by, the house became a real refuge. The puppies grew. Their clumsy steps filled the rooms with joy, and the shepherd, despite his lameness, played with them. Her three-legged body moved with amazing dexterity. The woman watched this family, feeling how her own life was taking on new meaning. She knew there was still a lot of work ahead. The puppies needed care, and the shepherd needed time to finally believe in safety. But every look, every movement of the tail, every moment when the shepherd lay down next to her said that they were on the right path. One day, sitting by the fireplace, the woman looked at the sleeping shepherd and her puppies curled up in a warm nest and whispered, "Welcome home." The wind howled softly outside the window, but inside it was warm, cozy, and calm. It was not just the beginning of a new life. It was a home built on trust,